Salutations everyone, this is Razor, explaining to you guys this week about comic book movie rights, as comic book movies have come to the forefront of box office success, as well as films that many people around the world love to enjoy. There's been a lot of confusion, especially recently, about what characters can be in films together. A lot of people have wishes about certain team-ups and joint ventures that really aren't possible. So there's been a lot of confusions. A lot of people have outdated information. So here I am in this video explaining everything to you about Marvel and DC and their comic book movie rights. Any other comic book publishers' movie rights are pretty much up in the air and really aren't that complicated, so we'll go and focus on the big two. We'll start off with DC because they are much less complicated than Marvel, and we'll get into Marvel later on in the video. As you all know, DC is a subsidiary of Warner Brothers, which of course is part of the Time Warner family, and they have enough money lined in their pockets to keep the rights to pretty much any character they should so choose to. So DC Universe is pretty much all locked up within the DC family. There are a few exceptions. Summit Entertainment has the rights to Red, which they've made 2 films. Lionsgate has the rights to Spirit, of which they made 1 film. And Fox has the right to League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, of which they have made 1 film. These are the rare exceptions to DC properties that are not owned solely by Warner Brothers, and they have been licensed out, so we can pretty much assume that they wouldn't have made these movies on their own anyways. But when it comes to pretty much anything of DC that you've heard of, anything outside of Red, Spirit, and the League, it's owned under Warner Brothers, so we don't have to worry about really much complications when it comes to large DC projects. So now we'll move on to Marvel, which really kickstarted the at least decent comic book movie film adaptations with the X-Men and Spider-Man films. So we'll start off with who owns the rights to X-Men, which is 20th Century Fox. They own the rights to X-Men as well as Fantastic Four and all related villains and characters to both those franchises. In X-Men, this includes all mutants as well as all mutates, such as Deadpool. And with the Fantastic Four, we have seen 2 adaptations in the first Fantastic Four film, as well as the Rise of the Silver Surfer, and the new trilogy that is going to be starting next year. With X-Men, we have seen 7 films so far, with the 5 team films, as well as the 2 standalone Wolverine films, and they hold all the rights to those characters. With Sony Pictures, they own the rights to Spider-Man and all related villains and characters. With 5 Spider-Man films so far under their belt, with the 3 Sam Raimi films and the 2 Mark Webb films, they own the rights to all of those characters. Next up, we have Universal Pictures, which owns the rights to Namor, who have yet to capitalize on these rights. Then we have Lionsgate, who owns the rights to Man-Thing, once again, yet to capitalize on these rights. And then, of course, you have Marvel Studios / Disney, who own all characters that are not affiliated with Spider-Man, X-Men, and the Fantastic Four. This includes Daredevil, Elektra, Ghost Rider, Punisher, and Blade, which had all been previously under rights of other companies. So all Marvel characters that are not affiliated with, like I said, X-Men, Spider-Man, Fantastic Four, Namor, and Man-Thing, outside of all those Marvel characters, they have the rights to all of those. Now, of course, there are some exceptions. For example, the characters Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch, which are so closely related to both the Avengers, as they were both members for a very long time, and to the X-Men, of course being Magneto's children after all, they can be used by both Fox and Marvel / Disney. There are rules to things that they can and cannot mention in those films, however. In Marvel Disney movies, such as the Avengers, they are not allowed to discuss mutants or Magneto or the X-Men. In X-Men movies, they aren't allowed to discuss the Avengers, or Iron Man, or Hulk, or anyone under the Marvel Disney umbrella. So that's pretty much all of Marvel in a nutshell. Now, why are all of these different franchises under different distributors? Well, it all comes down to money, really, and that's why these rights really, for the most part, haven't changed significantly in the past few years. We've seen some intellectual properties go back to Marvel, such as Daredevil, who is getting his own television show on Netflix coming up pretty soon. And we might be able to see Namor or Man-Thing come back under the Marvel Studio umbrella if the Universal or Lionsgate production companies do not make a film with them and their rights to their movies expire. What would it take for these rights to expire? They need to make a movie in a certain period of time to renew their rights to these franchises. Otherwise, they expire and go by default back to Marvel, from which they originated in the first place. So that's why you get some crappy movies like the X-Men Wolverine Origins film. They needed to keep the rights to Wolverine and the other X-Men characters, so they made that film to renew their contract. Same goes for the Fantastic Four. After not a very good showing in the first film, they made this Rise of the Silver Surfer movie to keep the rights to the film. And with the new Fantastic Four reboot starting up, we can assume that their rights were going to be up relatively soon. So that's what happens with these franchises. And now, money is really the driving force in all these things. And some people might wonder, oh, why don't they just do a joint adventure and just split the money? That's really not going to be in their best interest if they think that they can make more money out of it. Even if they can't, it's a greedy business. So even if Universal thinks that they can make more money by selling Namor back to Marvel, they would definitely rather have the option of making a Namor movie, having success with that, and then creating a franchise off of the success of that first film. That's really what all these studios are after. They're after a long-standing franchise that they can build on. Everyone wants what a Spider-Man can do or what an X-Men franchise can do, and have a standalone movie run success without needing many other vestigial characters to those main storylines. So that's basically it in a nutshell. Marvel, which didn't have their own movie studio production in the past, sold off their rights to certain franchises, and while many people would like those to revert back to Marvel, in the end it produces more films. Sometimes we pay for that in some lackluster titles such as the X-Men Origins Wolverine or the two Fantastic Four movies, or really whichever film that you didn't like. It's because of who they're being owned by. Not all of these studios are perfect. Some of them have some miscues throughout any of the franchises. But basically it all comes down to this. With DC having their own movie production company in Warner Brothers, they haven't had the need to sell off the rights to many of their franchises, so they've kept pretty much all of them in-house, at least those that they would deem to be successful in the long run. So what it all comes down to is a Kingdom Come movie is possible under the DC umbrella, but for Marvel, having a Civil War movie isn't going to be happening anytime soon, because with that you would need Spider-Man, X-Men, and the Avengers to make that type of movie possible. So while we would like to see Spider-Man hang out with the Human Torch, that's not going to happen. While we would like to see Wolverine fighting alongside Tony Stark and the Avengers, that's not going to happen. While you might want to see Namor be a villain in the new Fantastic Four movie, that's not going to happen. Some of these things might change, but for the most part, Spider-Man, X-Men, Fantastic Four, those aren't going to be under the Marvel Studios umbrella for the foreseeable future. Maybe not forever, because there are dips in the market, but for the past 15 years, these movie studios have found success even when their movies have been lackluster. It all comes up to money, it all comes up to greed, and when that happens, sometimes the fans profit, and sometimes they suffer. Anyways, that's it for you guys. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next time.